Alright, so the folder structure I'm gonna show you now works for all types and sizes of projects, whether you're just making a simple to-do application or even if you're making a social media clone. This structure is gonna be basically the same with just minor adjustments that I'm gonna show you along the video. And also for this video, I'm using React, Vite, and JavaScript, but this structure also works with vanilla JavaScript and Vite or with TypeScript. Again, we're just gonna need to make some minor adjustments and I'm gonna show you how. So the first thing you usually see when you're making a new project is something similar to this here. What we wanted to focus here is this source folder, because here is where we're gonna place all the new folders and files we create for this project. So let's go inside it, and here you can see that I already made all the folders that I'm gonna be showing you in this video. So to start with, do you remember when I said that if we're gonna use TypeScript or something else, we're gonna just make some minor adjustments? And for TypeScript, for example, the only thing you have to do is to add a new folder called types. We can even do it here, types. And if you are not working with a CSS framework like Tailwind, you usually gonna make a folder called styles, so you can put all the customizable CSS files inside. If you're working with Sass, then you would like to check on the internet, because Sass has its own folder structure that you wanna follow. But most of the times, I believe you're gonna be working with a CSS framework, then you probably don't need a styles folder, because you can just place it inside the index CSS file. Those three files is gonna always be here. And another thing is, if you are working only with the vanilla JavaScript, you're not gonna need these context, hooks, and providers folders, but the rest is gonna be the same. So as I said, this structure is gonna serve you for all the size of projects as well. The only thing you're gonna need if you're gonna make a smaller or bigger project is that you're gonna probably remove or add some folders. But if you need to add folders, you're just gonna follow the same structure and just repeat folders that we already have. So every time you're developing a new application, in 99% of the cases, you're gonna be working with an API. So you're gonna want to create an API folder, and inside this API folder, I usually build two subfolders, one for configuration and one for services. And inside the config file, I put all the things related to the API configuration. For example, if you're gonna make configurations for fetching with headers, then I put it inside here. If you are importing environment variables, then you're gonna place it here. If you're working with libraries that deal with the API, for example, Axios, we could place it here, or we could move it to the libraries folder, but usually I just keep it here because it's related to the API, and everything that's related to API configuration, I place it inside the config API folder. And for the services folder, I place all the API services. And what I mean by API services is all basic functions that fetch API or that sends data to the API. So all the functions that doesn't do anything else but interacts with the API, I place it here in the API services. And then we have the assets folder, and here is pretty basic. You're gonna have the images and the SVGs subfolders because you don't want to mix them up. So if you have SVGs, you're gonna place them here. Otherwise, you don't need this folder here. You're just gonna keep the images folder. Then you're gonna have the components folder, but we're gonna skip it for now because this is what I call the main folder. It's a world in itself, so we can do it as the last one. So then we have the context folder, and as the name says, we're gonna have all the contexts here. For example, the alt context and all contexts you're gonna ever make for your application, you're gonna place it inside the context so you know where to find them easily. And the same for hooks. You're gonna place all the hooks you have, like use auth, use fetch, or whatever hook you have, you're gonna place it here. And for the libraries folder, you're gonna place all the libraries configuration. For example, if you install React query and you're gonna make the specific configurations for your application, then you would put inside here. And you could also, for example, pick this file here and place inside here. But as I said, since it has to do with the API configuration, I like to keep it here. So libraries, everything that has to do with external libraries, you're gonna put inside here. For providers, all the providers that you have related to your application, you're gonna place it here. There is not much more I can say about the providers folder. And for the utils folder, I made a subfolder called functions here, because usually if you are working with local storage, then you wanted to make its own subfolder called storage, and you put all the local storage functions inside it, so you don't mix with the helper functions. But otherwise you don't need this subfolder here to called functions, because then you can put all the helpers inside the utils itself. And then we have pages. I skipped pages because I wanted to explain it a little bit deeper, and it is because some people place all the, like if they have an about page, they place the page itself here and all its related content together. But I don't do this. I tend to only put the page layout component itself, because I think it makes a lot easier to just like see which page we have, and then when we open it we can see all imported contents to the page, so then we know what components are related to that page. And then what I do with the content that are related to specific pages is I go to components, then I create subfolders for those components, and then I structure it in a certain way that I'm gonna show you, that makes life a lot easier. But before showing that, I'm gonna show another folder that I always have inside components. It is the auth folder, because I always tend to separate all the logics which are related to authorization and authentication, and then I make subfolders for the components that serves its own purpose but has to do with authorization and authentication. And if you have any protected or private routes, then you would make routes inside this one as well. This auth is actually optional, but I think it's a good practice. Then we have globals, and for globals, if you have multiple instances of the same component, then you make a subfolder for this component. For example, if you have multiple buttons, but then you're gonna use it globally in the project, like a call to action button and a slide button, then I make its own folder so it keeps it organized. But if I have file components that I'm gonna use it globally, but it's only one instance of it, then I don't need to make a subfolder. So for example, here I have a table, I have a modal, I have a loader, but I have forms and buttons, because usually you have multiple instances of forms that you're gonna use globally, and then you have multiple instances of buttons. And then we have layout, and layout is something that, if you don't know, it's a convention, it's a standard that you always have to have if you are using React routers. In layout, you're gonna have the footer, the header, and the layout itself. I even put it here to show. And then we have the components subfolders for like major components that we're gonna have in our page. But here's something important. You remember when I said that this folder structure is gonna be used for also for bigger projects, and the way you're gonna use it is just to repeat some folders. In this case here, this application is social media. So in a social media application, we usually have so many components related to the post, for example. And what I do to make it clean and organized is I created a folder for the major components like post content, and then inside this folder I always make 3 subfolders, and what I place inside those folders is all the actions, services, and UI related to post content. And the same you can do to the profile section, for example, or like to contact components. So for example, for the actions, I have all the file that has indeed to do with actions related to post content. For example, create post, delete post, edit post. Those are all actions that we make in our code. So then I put it inside the actions folder. And then all the services is the files that deals with the logic of the posts. Like in display single post, you're gonna make a fetching and you're gonna loop through the array. And then here you're gonna display it in its own template. And usually this component just import the logics, but it's not gonna have coding logics in itself. So the same you can do to all the other major components. For example, if you have a profile components, and then you're gonna break down to fetch user profile, edit profile. Edit profile, for example, it would be an action, and fetch it would be a service. And then you would have to make the logic inside these services to see if the profile matches to be edited, for example. And then you would make like the display profile, and then it would be a template to actually displaying for the user. Then it would come here in the UI. So the same structure you can use for every other major component. So basically that's it for this video. I don't want to make it any longer. If you guys feel that this video has helped you in any sort of way, so give it a like, drop a comment below, and if it has something that you'd like to see in the next video, videos, just let me know as well in the comments. Thank you, and I hope to see you again in the next one.